The Premier League is the most watched league in the world, and its players become superstars. At the highest level, Mohamed Salah, Bukayo Saka, and Erling Haaland are household names, and even Liam Delap, whose Ipswich Town got relegated, was thrust into the limelight with a £30 million move to Chelsea, who went on to win the Club World Cup, rubbing shoulders with the most powerful man in the world at the trophy lift. Even with this huge level of attention, there are some people who are technically on Premier League squad lists, which even fans of the team they were on could be forgiven for forgetting. Today, I'm picking one player for every team in the league that I bet you forgot was still contracted to your club. Arsenal. Karl Hein. There's no lack of options for Arsenal, with the likes of Fabio Vieira, Reece Nelson, and Albert Sambi Lokonga returning from loans no less unwanted than 12 months ago. But Karl Hein is someone that most people won't have heard of, despite playing for one of the world's largest clubs and being capped 39 times for his country. Arsenal snapped him up from Estonian third-tier side Nõmme United in 2018, and while still being in the Gunners' Academy, was capped for Estonia for the first time in 2020 in a Nations League loss at home to Georgia. He became his country's number one before making a senior appearance for Arsenal and was sent on loan to Championship Reading for the second half of the 2021-22 season, playing 5 games for the Royals before picking up a finger injury and being sent back to North London. The next season, he made his only official Arsenal appearance, starting and playing the whole game in a 3-1 loss in the Carabao Cup at home to Brighton, giving away a penalty in the process. He spent the season just gone on loan to yo-yo club Real Valladolid in La Liga, by far the highest level of club football he's playing nearly every game but for a shoulder injury, and the Albi Violetas finished bottom of Spain's top flight, going straight back down to the second tier. Unlike the others I mentioned at the start, there could actually be a future for Hein at the Emirates as a backup goalie, although you have to imagine Arsenal would snap up any meaningful fee for the Estonia number one. The signing of Kepa Arrizabalaga shows at best Mikel Arteta considers him a number 3, and most gooners you ask on the street will say something like, "Who is that? I forgot he was still with us," and "Who are you and why are you asking me questions about Karl Hein?" Aston Villa. Leander Dendoncker. I considered putting Louis Barry on this list, but I suspect Villa fans are still holding out hope that he meets his potential despite being put on a carousel of loans, and he anyway isn't part of the senior team. Instead, I've gone with Leander Dendoncker, who was once one of the most sought-after youngsters in Belgium, choosing Giants Anderlecht's academy over those of Standard Liège, Bruges and Henk. After making his debut in 2013, he became a regular part of the purple-white side in the 2014-15 season, and the next 3 seasons after that, earning his first Belgium cap in 2015 and going to the World Cup in 2018 in Russia, where the Red Devils finished third. This earned him a loan to newly promoted Wolves, which was quickly upgraded to a permanent after a season, and became a regular player for Wolves, including in the Europa League in the 1920 season, also going to Euro 2020 and the 2022 World Cup with Belgium. After spending 4 seasons at Molineux, including the one on loan, he made the short trip across the West Midlands to Aston Villa in the summer of 2022. Dendoncker's time at Villa has been a waste of time. His first season saw his time limited to appearances from the bench, being cup-tied after playing the first few games with Wolves, having small niggling injuries, and what Unai Emery called a problem at home. His time was even more limited the season after that, with just 5 starts and only 1 in the league, before he was sent on loan to Napoli in January. In Naples, he sat rotting on the bench, coming off it 3 times to make a total of 21 minutes. And it's no surprise he hasn't been capped since 2023. He spent the season just gone back on loan at Anderlecht, and at first glance it seems that it's a fitting end to the story, as he made 43 appearances back at his home club. However, it was a poor season for Anderlecht, and despite him coming with Premier League pedigree, he ended up having to defend his performances in an interview with Belgian media, while also admitting that while he will return to Villa following his loan, he knows he is not in Unai Emery's plans. With 1 year left on his contract, Villa might want to find a transfer fee for him, if anyone will have him. It's pretty remarkable downfall for someone who was part of the team that came third in the World Cup, and being the Belgian key to Wolves' famous Portugal-inspired team, to not standing out, at least not for positive reasons, at Anderlecht. His time at Villa was so forgettable, you could forgive people for not even knowing he'd gone there in the first place, but surely he warrants a place on this list, and most Villa staff will be hoping he isn't there for much longer. Bournemouth. Max Aarons. Like Dendoncker, Aarons, and yes, it is pronounced like that, was someone there was a lot of hype about in the past, as the right back came through Norwich's academy, breaking into the team for the 2018-19 season and making 43 appearances as the Canaries won the championship. Daniel Farke stared law to him, even with Norwich now in the Prem, and he again became a regular, this time in the top division, although he could not save Norwich from finishing bottom and going back down. Another season in the Championship and another title was followed by another season in the Premier League, where the East Anglians went straight back down bottom. And after a season in mid-table at the Championship, topped off with being part of the England under-21 side which won the Euros, Aarons decided to jump ship to Bournemouth. Despite starting the season with regular minutes, Aarons was limited by 2 hamstring injuries to just 23 games, and after he returned, his place was lost to Adam Smith. In the 24-25 season, his minutes were extremely limited, while Smith pushed on under Andoni Iraola, with just 4 appearances before being sent to Valencia on loan. However, he had just 5 games with Los Che, and only 2 starts as he failed to unstick Dimitri Folkier in the right-back spot. He's likely to be on this list again next season, as Iraola has made it abundantly clear Aarons is not in his plans by sending him on loan to Rangers before the pre-season even started. Another player that hasn't hit his full potential, he'll be far from mind from most Bournemouth fans as he spends a season north of the border. Brentford, Ellery Balcombe. Ellery Balcombe is perhaps the exact type of player that this list was made for. At Brentford since he was 8, the goalie made it through the academy at the then Championship side, but his career has probably not gone how he would have dreamt so far. After graduating to the seniors, he was sent on loan to Boreham Wood in the National League for the 18-19 season. He started as a regular in England's 5th flight, but then returned to West London early following an injury picked up with England under-20s. After that, he was returned to Brentford's B team and then sent on loan to Viborg in the Danish 2nd tier. He played 8 games before being sent off against Koya, being suspended until the winter break, and again being sent home early with a season-ending back injury. For the next season, he was considered Brentford's number 3 and so was kept at the Community Stadium, but in the winter was sent out on a 6-month loan to Doncaster in League One, where he spent most of the season as Rovers' number 1. Balcombe's chances of regular playing time for his boyhood club massively decreased that season through no fault of his own, as the Bees were promoted to the Premier League. Next up was the loan move to Burton, but he spent the whole time on the bench, only playing 3 times in the EFL Trophy, before he was sent to National League Bromley, where he did get a starting spot, most notably playing in their win in the FA Trophy final at Wembley. The loan carousel continued in 22-23 with a move to League Two Crawley, where he was starting regularly, got injured, came back to play regularly again, and then had his loan terminated in winter, upgrading to League One Bristol Rovers, where he was number 1, but often kept out by injuries. After all that time, in 23-24, he was kept in West London as the number 3, even making his Bees debut in a Carabao Cup win away to Newport, being the hero as the Bees won on penalties. That was his only appearance, and the season just gone, he returned to his loan situation, joining St Mirren, where he played every game for the Buddies, including in the Conference League qualifiers, before that was terminated and he was sent to Motherwell instead for the rest of the season. That is a pretty crazy career since becoming a senior Brentford player, playing for 9 different clubs while never transferring, and making only 1 appearance for Brentford. He did well in Scotland by all accounts, but it's hard to see a place for him with Quivin Kelleher just signed to replace Mark Flecken and Hakon Valdemarsson as number 2. If you're good enough to star in the Scottish Premiership, you're probably good enough for the Championship. But unfortunately for Balcombe, the Bees aren't there anymore, and it will probably be another season in limbo before his contract expires. Brighton, Abdallah Sima. Brighton have the dubious honour of featuring a huge amount of names who could be on this list, including Jeremy Sarmiento, Kjell Sherpen, and Tom McGill, but I've gone with Abdallah Sima. Sima had an interesting route into football, being scouted in his native Senegal by a French lower league club before moving to Czechia on the advice of his agent. He was signed by local giant Slavia Prague, and impressed with their B team so much he was fast-tracked to the first team in 2020, and after scoring 16 goals in the 2021 season, snapped up by Brighton. The right winger was sent to Championship Stoke on loan, but ankle, back and groin injuries limited him to just 4 appearances, somehow playing more for Slavia Prague despite leaving them in August, and also spending more time playing for Stoke's under-23s than their first team. The next season was with Angers, where he was a rotation option mostly used as a striker, as the Black and Whites finished bottom of Ligue 1. Next up was Rangers in Scotland, which was Sima's best season, netting 16 goals for the Light Blues on the left wing, and regaining his place in the Senegal squad, after having brief time there in 2021, including playing in the Africa Cup of Nations. Next up was Brest, where he was again a rotation player in a side that was in the Champions League, scoring 12 in all competitions. Honestly, everything about this career is just weird. Brighton bought this guy from Czechia and then loaned him out to a different club every season for 4 in a row. And unlike some of the others on this list, he's actually looked pretty good, especially in his latest 2 seasons. They've just extended his contract by a year, so maybe Fabian Hutzler will want to look at him in pre-season. Whatever happens in the future, though, he has been a completely forgotten man in Sussex, with 0 games in 4 years for the Seagulls. Burnley. Michael Obafemi. Striker Michael Obafemi earned a lot of interest when he burst onto the scene as a Southampton youngster, being at the time the second youngest to play for them in the Premier League and also the Saints' youngest Prem goalscorer, and becoming the first player born in the 2000s to earn a cap for the Republic of Ireland. However, he never became a regular at Southampton and was sold to Swansea in 2021, spending 18 months playing regular Championship football before being loaned to Burnley. After 6 months coming off the bench for the Clarets, he was sold on a permanent, but his game time was already limited and became paltry as they went up to the Premier League. After 2 cameos, he was loaned to Millwall, and the striker was mostly a starter, scoring 2 goals in 14 games for the Lions. Even though Burnley went back down, Scott Parker had no interest in using him in the Championship, sending him to Plymouth on loan, where he was a rotation player, netting 2 goals in 31 appearances, and often forced out wide to the left as the Pilgrims were relegated from the second flight. Now back at Burnley, it is inconceivable that Parker would have any interest in using him in the Premier League. It's a shame for Obafemi, who was a hype talent but whose acquisition was a mistake for everyone involved, with the Irishman unloved at Turf Moor and not having much joy on loan, seeing his international career take a hit as a result, with his last competitive appearance for the Boys in Green in 2023. His development hasn't gone as it should, and for me, it's unclear what the best step for Obafemi is. Maybe finding a foreign, more striker friendly league where he can strut his stuff. Maybe the season coming up, he will find himself a better fitting jersey. Chelsea. Armando Broja. Chelsea have been known to have huge amounts of players on the books while loaning out some without ever intending to actually use them. Since their new American inspired strategy of tying players to extra large contracts began, this also means a lot of players coming through the door who the Blues find it hard to get rid of if they find them not up to Chelsea standards. Armando Broja is someone who came through Chelsea's academy though, winning every trophy there is to win at youth level, before the striker made his debut for the Pensioners in March 2020, a cameo off the bench in a 4-0 win at home to Everton. He then had a successful loan spell at Eredivisie Vitesse, scoring 11 goals and earning a new contract at Chelsea, as well as making his first cap for Albania. They then sent him to Southampton for regular Prem football, and he did okay with the Saints, scoring 9 in all competitions. He was kept at Stamford Bridge for the 22-23 season, often coming off the bench, being behind Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang in the pecking order, and got his first Chelsea goal off the bench in a 3-0 win at home to Wolves. However, as Albania weren't at the World Cup, he played in the friendlies to keep players who didn't go to Qatar fit, and picked up a season-ending knee injury. In the 23-24 campaign, he returned too late to be sold, and actually got pretty regular minutes, mostly off the bench for Chelsea in the first half of the season, deputising for Nicholas Jackson at number 9, and scoring 2 more goals. It was therefore a bit of a surprise to see him loaned to West London rivals Fulham, who actually gave him significantly less time than Chelsea did, as he played 8 games for the Cottagers, all of them off the bench. I think a lot of Blues fans actually quite liked Broja, who came through the academy, was not a big money player in terms of transfer fee or wages, and always put in a professional performance when he came on. However, the last season was a significant hit to the Albanian, as he had a loan move to Everton, which was completely forgettable due to 2 major injuries, one to his Achilles tendon and one to his ankle, limiting him to just 11 appearances and no goals or assists. When he is fit, he normally starts for his country, but he's had 2 dodgy loan spells in a row, and his best role seems to be being a sub for Chelsea. The Blues will always spend on some new striker though, with 55 million plus a potential 5 more in add-ons for João Pedro, and that 30 million Liam Delap move I mentioned earlier. Both of those put Broja further down the pecking order. He's not the only person on this list, with the likes of David Datro Fofana, David Washington, and even bigger names like Joao Felix and Raheem Sterling on the Chelsea periphery. But I think Broja's name, which carries goodwill amongst Chelsea fans, will be far from most of their memory. Crystal Palace, Rob Holding. Unlike a lot of these players, who most will associate with their club but be surprised they're still there, most people will not link the names Crystal Palace and Rob Holding in their minds at all. Holding came through the Bolton Academy, making his senior debut in 2015 on a loan to League Two Bury. After that, the young centre-back was thrust into the Bolton first team for the 2015-16 season, a test he passed with flying colours, earning him a move to Arsenal. Holding broke into the Arsenal first 11 at the end of his debut season in North London, including playing in the 2017 FA Cup final, but was mostly a rotation player at most, especially after an ACL rupture in 2018, which kept him out for 9 months. After returning in the 1920 season and playing in another FA Cup final, he became a regular starter in 2021 before less minutes in 21-22 and 22-23. To Arsenal fans, Holding was liked for his professionalism, but often considered a figure of the so-called banter years, consisting of the latter stages of Arsene Wenger's time, Unai Emery's doomed spell in charge, and Mikel Arteta's early seasons before his project took liftoff, where the Gunners were light on quality. In 22-23, when Arteta's Arsenal suddenly found themselves in a title race, their end-of-season collapse coincided with an injury to William Saliba, putting Holding in his place. Will I say coincided? It probably wasn't a coincidence. After that, he was sold to Crystal Palace for £4 million and made his debut for the Eagles in a 3-0 loss away to Man U in the Carabao Cup. 2 years on, and that remains his only appearance in red and blue. He spent the 23-24 season on the bench before injuries took even that away from him, and then in the 24-25 campaign, after being on the bench again in a 2-0 loss at home to West Ham, had a bust-up with Palace coach Oliver Glasner over a post-match running session, for which the Austrians sent him to the under-21s. He played 7 times for them, or to put it another way, 6 more than he has for Palace's senior team, despite being 29. He must have felt very strange being surrounded by kids just a year and a bit after coming so close to getting his hands on the Premier League trophy. Holding got a bit of a reprieve with a winter loan move to Championship Sheffield United, but even then he was not a regular player, making 11 appearances but only 4 starts for the Blades, and playing just 9 minutes in the playoffs as the Yorkshire side lost the final at Wembley to Sunderland. Now he's back and is still technically a Crystal Palace player, although he has more chance of playing for the Harlem Globetrotters than ever representing the Eagles again. An absolute slam dunk inclusion on this list. Everton. Youssef Chermiti. There wasn't a good option for Everton, whose fans definitely still remember who Chermiti is, but I think a lot of the wider football world would have forgotten about him. Chermiti came through the academy of Sporting CP, and after a year playing for their B team, who play in Portugal's third tier, he was added to their first team squad for the 2022-23 season. He broke into the team into the second half of it, with the striker making 22 appearances, including 10 starts, all in the calendar year 2023. That was enough for a €12.5 million move to Everton, rising to €15 million with add-ons, including a 12.5% sell-on clause. He was never present in the Toffees matchday squad that season, but nearly always came off the bench, with 20 appearances and only 2 starts with no goals, as he deputised for Dominic Calvert-Lewin. The season just gone, a foot injury and then a hamstring injury took up most of his season, and he managed just 4 appearances, all off the bench, for a combined 42 minutes of football. Chermiti is a Portugal under-21 international, but injury would have paused his development, and it isn't serving him well to sit on the bench all season. With £27 million striker Tieno Barry coming in from Villarreal, it might be tough for him to get a look in, and for his sake I hope a loan move is forthcoming which gets him a regular football, to help meet his potential. Fulham. Luke Harris. There aren't too many good options for Fulham, but those who watch Luke Harris in Birmingham's big money rise out of League One might be unaware that he was actually a Fulham loanee. Having come through the Cottagers Academy, the attacking midfielder was given his senior debut in 2022, playing the first half in a 2-0 loss to Crawley in the Carabao Cup. He spent most of the season playing under-21 football, but had 3 very brief Premier League appearances that year as well, and also another start in the FA Cup, which led to him pretty bizarrely being called up to the Wales senior team, although he did not win a cap for the Dragons and still hasn't. Starting the 23-24 season with Fulham under-21, interspersed by 2 games for the first team, including his first Prem start, he was then sent on loan to League One Exeter for the rest of the season, being a regular starter for the Grecians. After that experience, he went to Birmingham on loan for the whole of the 24-25 season, where he was a rotation option for the Blues as they won the League One title, although he did not come off the bench in their EFL Trophy final defeat at Wembley. Still a part of the Wales under-21 squad, I think Fulham would have been better off loaning him to a League One side, which would have played him a bit more than Birmingham did, but he has certainly been part of a winning dressing room. It's interesting to see how Harris will develop. Leeds. Jack Harrison. Jack Harrison has spent the last 2 years playing Premier League football for Everton, but is still technically a Leeds United player. Harrison's pathway into football is interesting, having been at the Man U Academy when he went to the US as a teenager, playing Division 1 college soccer with the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, making him the number one overall pick in the MLS Super Draft by Chicago Fire, later being traded to New York City. The number one overall pick in a draft has major attention in US sports, both as a genuine accolade in its own right, and also just as a trivia question, with stars like LeBron James, Peyton Manning, Alex Rodriguez, and Alexander Ovechkin among those two, I'm sure, be honoured to be mentioned in the same breath as Harrison. After two strong seasons in the MLS, he was moved to Man City, the main club in City Football Group, which also owns NYCFC, and immediately loaned out to Championship Middlesbrough for the second half of the 17-18 season. However, the winger, who can play on either side, managed only 4 appearances, all of them as a sub, as he fell to unseated Dama Traore as Boro made it to the playoffs, losing in the semi-finals to Aston Villa, with Harrison spending the entirety of both legs on the bench. The next season, it was another championship loan, this time to his current club Leeds. He was a regular starter for the Whites, alternating between the left and right flank, playing every minute of the playoffs as they lost to Derby in the semi-final. He was sent there again for the next season, playing every game and starting basically all of them, scoring 6 and tallying 8 assists as they won the championship. A third loan move in a row came with the Whites now in the Prem, and he impressed, missing 3 games all season, scoring 8 goals and bagging 8 assists as they recorded a top half finish. This finally earned him a permanent transfer to Welland Road, and he scored 10 goals in all competitions despite Leeds slide down the table. On final day, with them level on points with Burnley but with a worse goal difference, Harrison scored a last-minute winner away to Brentford, securing survival with Burnley losing at home to Newcastle. Unfortunately, the next season there would be no repeat of the heroics, as the Whites were relegated, with Harrison regularly featuring. The next season he was sent on loan to Everton, as he was still considered good enough to feature in the Premier League. A regular starter for the Toffees, with Leeds failing to come up, he was loaned to them again for the season just gone, and though he started more often than not, his minutes still declined, with 24 starts in total. Notably, he was only a sub for Everton's last ever game at Goodison Park. Now Leeds are back in the Premier League, the former England under-21 international is in a bit of a strange position. You might think Leeds would want to keep him as someone with regular Prem experience now that they are back in the top division, but journalists have been kept in the dark as to whether he will feature in pre-season for them this year. Not counting his time on the bench at Middlesbrough, Harrison has spent 5 of the last 8 seasons on loan, and after 24 months in Liverpool, it must be forgotten by most that he is for now technically a Leeds player. Leeds, Calvin Ramsey. Though super clubs generally lend themselves to this sort of thing, not so at Liverpool, where the squad is kept tight and even the loan list is mostly just a yellow pages for youngsters, which feels like cheating. I've gone with Calvin Ramsey, who came through as a prospect at Aberdeen, with the right back making a few token appearances at the end of the 2021 season, before becoming a first team starter with the Dons in the 21-22 campaign, only being halted by a hamstring injury. This caught the eye of Liverpool, who snapped him up for £4.2 million, putting him straight in the first team. Ramsey made his debut for the club in 2022, coming off the bench in a Champions League win over Napoli, before another game in the Carabao Cup a week later. He also earned his first cap for Scotland the week after that, playing the second half in a friendly defeat against Turkey. Nearly 3 years on, and those remain his only appearances for Liverpool and Scotland. A surgery was announced in February which kept him out for the rest of the 22-23 season, and for the 23-24 campaign he was sent on loan to Championship Preston. Despite it being a season-long loan, he had made just 2 appearances at Deepdale by Winter, so Liverpool recalled him and he took another step down, this time to League One Bolton. Even there, he barely had a sniff, having just 4 appearances, and the season just gone it was another trip to League One, this time with Wigan. Things went a bit better, and I do mean a bit, as he made 12 appearances before being recalled again midway through the season, and then sent to Kilmarnock, for whom he played 8 times. In all of his loans, he has been at best a rotation option, and despite making his senior debut in 2022 for Scotland, he now isn't even in their under-21 squad, from making his first team debut for one of the biggest teams in the world, in the biggest competition of all. He has spent the next 3 years touring benches in the EFL and Scottish Premiership, with just one season of regular football in his whole career. A promising talent has been chewed up by a mega club and spat out with his development stunted, and now the Reds will have no need for him. A sad tale for pretty much everyone involved. Man City, Josh Wilson-Esbrand. Man City have perhaps the most high-profile candidate for this list in Calvin Phillips, but his time at City has been such a disaster for literally every party involved that despite gruesome loan spells at West Ham and Ipswich, he is probably still too well known to be a City player, at least on paper, in this video. Instead, I've chosen Josh Wilson-Esbrand, who was an academy product, just about, having been swiped from West Ham's youth setup shortly before graduation. The left-back received his senior debut in 2021 in a 6-1 Carabao Cup win at home to Wycombe, even assisting Riyad Mahrez for the goal that put the citizens in front. That was it for him in the first team that season, however, as he spent most of the year playing for the under-21 squad. In 22-23, he came off the bench in Champions League group phase games at home to Copenhagen and Sevilla, but still mostly played under-21 football before a loan to Championship Coventry. Wilson-Esbrand was a rotation option for the Sky Blues as they lost in the playoff final on penalties to Luton, but he sat the entirety of the playoffs themselves on the bench. An intriguing move to Ligue 1 Reims was next, where he managed 13 appearances, including his only senior goal in a 1-0 win over Lorient, as well as his 2 caps for England under-21s, but niggling injuries limited his playing time, and he was recalled on loan to Cardiff instead. He was the first-choice left-back for the Bluebirds, something he hadn't been able to say for anyone else in his senior career yet, before a hamstring injury earned his season early. Wilson-Esbrand spent the first half of the season just gone staying at City, although it did seem a bit pointless as he sat on the bench a few times, never came on, and all this did was that he had less playing time with the under-21s. Another Championship loan move, this time to Stoke, came for the second half of the season, but a calf injury got in the way of his minutes. He's been at City for a long time now, but hasn't played a game for them since 2022, and has had 4 loan spells since, one where he was a rotation player, and 3 where he could have been a starter, but injuries rendered the question moot. A bit of a shame for a lad who clearly has bags of talent, but Man City will grow tired of paying for his hospital bills, and you could be forgiven for forgetting he existed. The contradiction here is that his loans are so forgettable that you might have not known he did go, and therefore still think he was at City. But give me a break. There aren't too many good options, as all their signings are too high profile. Man United, Tom Heaton. A very obvious inclusion in this list, Heaton is amongst the more high-profile players here, and was actually a youth product of United, back when they were good. After his time in the academy, he got a loan to Swindon for the first half of the 05-06 season. A half season as the Robins #1 was followed by a pointless loan for the second half to Royal Antwerp in the Belgian second tier, where he didn't play a game. He spent the 06-07 and 07-08 seasons as United's #3 goalie, again not playing a match. In 08-09, it was a loan to Championship Cardiff, where he started as #1 but lost his place following an injury and the good form of his replacement Peter Enkelman. Next season was a 3-month emergency loan for QPR, who needed a backup goalie, and a backup he was, only playing 2 games in the Carling Cup. He was then sent to League 2 Rochdale for the first half of the season, for whom he played every game, and then League 1 Wycombe for the second half, again playing every game. Despite United wanting to keep him, he ran down his contract in 2010, having made 75 appearances for 5 clubs as a United player, and none of them being Man U. He signed a new deal with Cardiff, where he was the #1 in the 2010-11 season before an injury made his place competitive as they brought in cover on loan, with Stephen Bywater preferred for the playoff final defeat to Reading. The next season, he lost his place to David Marshall, who was injured the previous campaign, but was used as a cup goalie, including in the Carling Cup final, where they lost on penalties to Liverpool. Again running down his contract, he then went to Bristol City, being the regular starter as the Robins finished bottom of the Championship. After that, it was another Championship side in Burnley, and he played every game bar 1 as the Clarets were promoted. He kept his place in the Premier League, again playing every game bar 1, but they went straight back down. He stayed with them in the Championship as their new captain, again missing just 1 game all year, and Burnley won the league, for which Heaton was rewarded with his England debut in a friendly against Australia and a place in the Euro 2016 squad. Again, he was Burnley's undisputed #1 in the 16-17 season, during which he got his other two England caps and started the next season as the main goalie as well. However, he picked up a shoulder injury on the fifth game of the season at home to Palace, and by the time that he was back 6 months later, Nick Pope had taken his spot for good. Pope himself picked up an injury next season, and Heaton received a small one, leading to Burnley signing Joe Hart. However, Heaton replaced Hart in goal for December, playing the second half of the season. With Pope's return imminent, however, he saw the writing on the wall and jumped ship to newly promoted Aston Villa. He again played the first half of the season before a knee injury against his old side Burnley ruled him out for the second half, and then with him still on the treatment table for the new campaign, saw his club buy Emiliano Martinez to replace him, and he was their number two after recovering, not playing once that season. His contract ran out and he returned to United in 2021, making his debut for the club 19 years after joining them in a Champions League draw at home to Young Boys. The season after that, he played 2 games in the Carabao Cup, those being the quarter-final against Charlton and the semi-final second leg against Forest, before being benched for their final win against Newcastle at Wembley. That semi-final was his last appearance for United, but he's just renewed his contract for another season, with his only game time last year coming for the under-21s in the EFL Trophy against Barnsley. Yes, a 39-year-old really did play for the under-21s. With Scott Carson at City being replaced by Marcus Bettinelli, Manchester clubs have a weird taste for ageing, rarely capped English goalies, who they never plan to use. A weird one, and many people will remember this guy's career without knowing he is at United, or even that he went there in the first place. Newcastle. Isaac Hayden. Newcastle have the same thing for aged goalies who will never play as United do, with John Ruddy and Mark Gillespie very reasonable options for this list. To mix it up, I've gone with Isaac Hayden. An Arsenal Academy graduate, the defensive midfielder made his debut for the Gunners in a 2013 EFL Cup win at West Brom on penalties, before featuring again once in the same competition next season. He spent the 15-16 campaign on loan to Championship Hull, where he got some limited minutes for the Tigers but was not used in their successful playoff run. After that, he left Arsenal to join newly relegated Newcastle on a permanent basis and was a pretty regular starter, apart from some minor injuries, as the Magpies went straight back up as champions. He was still a rotation option in the Premier League, and in the second half of the 18-19 season, and nearly the whole 19-20 and 2021 campaigns, was among the first names on the team sheet. He started the 21-22 season the same way, but a knee surgery kept him out of the second half of it, and the next campaign featured a loan to Championship Norwich. Though he did get game time when fit, it was limited by persistent knee issues, and at the end of the campaign, Eddie Howe said he wanted a clear break from Hayden and fellow loanee Jeff Hendrick. 2 years later, and Hayden is still technically a Newcastle player. In 23-24, it was a loan move to Standard Liège in Belgium, for whom he normally started before that was cut short in the winter and replaced by another loan to QPR in the Championship, where he was a pretty consistent starter. He actually spent the first half of the season just gone at Newcastle, although without being named in the squad. Although he did receive his first Jamaica cap in November. In winter, he got a loan move to Portsmouth, again in the second tier, for whom he was a rotation option. He also missed out on the Reggae Boys Gold Cup squad. Unlike a lot on this list, Hayden has actually been a good servant to his club, with 171 appearances, but is a relic of a bygone era, when the austere Mike Ashley was happy to make do with Arsenal's leftover, and he was regularly trotted out in England's top flight. With Saudi money bringing in an array of higher-profile midfielders, there is no longer any room for Hayden, who remains technically a Newcastle player, despite no one at St James's Park wanting him anymore. Nottingham Forest. Lewis O'Brien. A graduate of Huddersfield's academy, O'Brien was sent to Bradford on loan for the 18-19 season, and the midfielder impressed as a regular starter despite the Bantams finishing bottom of League One in his first season in senior football. His parent club were also relegated, and he stayed at Huddersfield for the Championship campaign, also playing regularly. 2 more seasons in the heart of the Terriers' defence followed, including the 2022 playoff final, which they lost to Nottingham Forest. Forest took O'Brien with them to the Premier League in a transfer, but after starting the first few games was quickly replaced by other options. Having made 17 appearances for the Trees, and after a winter loan to Blackburn fell through because of paperwork, he was instead sent to DC United in the MLS for the rest of the 22-23 season, being a regular starter in the American capital, before a full season loan to Championship Middlesbrough, where he again was part of a of the starting 11, apart from when this was interrupted by an injury in the middle of the campaign. The season just gone, he went to Los Angeles FC in the MLS for the rest of its 2024 season, before going back to the Championship with Swansea for the remainder of the British 24-25 campaign. Unlike others on this list, he has not had loan hell, playing regularly in both the MLS and Championship for various clubs. But boy did Forest discard him quickly after he initially signed for them. An odd case, but I'm sure he'll be fine whenever he moves on. Sunderland, Jay Matete. Jay Matete came out of the academy of Fleetwood Town, making his debut for the Cod Army in the 1920 season, where he made 3 appearances in the EFL Trophy. After limited playing time in League One in the next campaign, the midfielder was sent on loan to League Two Grimsby for the second half of it, where he was a regular starter as the Mariners finished bottom of the division. Returning to Fleetwood, he had regular minutes in League One, and impressed enough for Sunderland, then also in the third tier, to sign him in winter. He played pretty regularly for the Black Cats, but was not trusted in the playoffs, making cameos in both legs of the semi-final and spending the whole of the final win over Wycombe on the Wembley bench. Unfortunately, his own club's success probably hurt him in the long run, as the next season his time was much limited in the Championship, and halfway through the campaign he was sent back to League One in a loan move to Plymouth. He was used much more there, although often off the bench, as the Pilgrims won the league, and he also started their defeat in the EFL Trophy final at Wembley. A knee issue kept him out for the first half of the 23-24 season, and then a loan to Oxford was cut short after 6 games because he required surgery on it after returning. The season just gone, it was another League One loan, this time for the whole campaign to Bolton Wanderers. He was a rotation option at the Tough Sheets Community Stadium and has returned to Wearside to see his parent club now in the Premier League. It seems pretty unlikely that Reggie Labrie will want to use him in the Prem, seeing as he didn't even think him good enough for the Championship. A player who was signed for League One football has now paid for his own club's success, but at least he is getting regular loan moves in the English third tier. Spurs, Bryan Gil. Bryan Gil came through the Sevilla Academy, and the winger was added to the first team as a squad player in the 18-19 season, making 13 appearances from the bench, including a goal against Rayo Vallecano, which made him the first player born in the 21st century to score in La Liga. His time the next season was limited mostly to Europa League cameos, so he spent the second half of it on loan to Leganés, also in La Liga, where he played more regularly, also on the bench. He finally got regular football as a starter at that level on a season-long loan to Eibar, where he impressed enough to get his first Spain call-ups and also won a silver medal at the Olympics in Tokyo, although the Gunsmiths finished bottom of the Spanish top flight. Reading all this surprised me because I just assumed he would be some wonder kid that didn't meet his potential at Tottenham. But when Spurs signed him for £21.6 million, he had only had 1.5 sporadic seasons in La Liga, followed by 1 playing regularly for its worst side. His first half season in North London was also sporadic, with 20 appearances but only 9 in the league, and all of those 9 being off the bench, and he was loaned back to La Liga with Valencia, where he was a rotation player. The next season was similar, spending the first half of it as a rare option off the bench or in the cups with Spurs, before a second half loan spell, this time to Sevilla, where he was again used in rotation, most notably starting the Europa League final, which they won on penalties, before being subbed off at half-time. He actually spent the whole 23-24 campaign at Tottenham, although managed just 12 appearances and 2 starts. Finally, last year, he spent the whole season on loan at La Liga Girona, where he was a regular starter, except for the last 2 months when he was injured. After playing games in 2021, he was recalled to the Spain squad in November 2024, but the injury prevented him from consideration in the last 2 breaks. Just a strange one altogether, and I don't know what possessed Spurs to spend an 8-figure sum on this player, and they clearly realised quite quickly that they did not want him as a regular member of their squad, with 3 La Liga teams given the task of babysitting him. Just an odd one altogether, but at least he is still playing regularly at a good level. West Ham, Maxwell Cornet. A product of the Mets Academy, Cornet became a squad player for the Maroons in the 2013-14 season, as they were promoted from Ligue 2 as champions. Despite not being used with Mets now in Ligue 1, midway through the season he was purchased by Lyon, who gave him 4 token appearances. The next season, the left winger became a rotation option for them, managing 12 goals and 10 more in the 16-17 campaign, which ended with his debut for Côte d'Ivoire. He never became a regular starter for Legon, always being rotated in and out, until he changed position to left-back at the end of the 1920 season. After another full season, he departed Lyon for Burnley for €15 million and scored 9 goals and was well liked at Turf Moor. However, as Burnley went down, he went to pastures new in West Ham, where a calf injury limited his playing time, starting just 6 times, with 4 in the Europa Conference League, which West Ham won, although he was on the bench for the whole of the semi-finals and final. Even when he was fit in the 23-24 season, he only played 16 times with just 3 starts, and it was clear then that it was time up for the Ivorian. Flogged on loan to Southampton, he apparently wasn't even good enough for the newly promoted Saints, who we all remember how rubbish they were last season, playing only 4 times before West Ham recalled him and sent him to Genoa in Serie A instead. He played 7 times for them, but this was hit by injuries. He also hasn't played for his country since 2023. I'd be surprised if Graham Potter even has his phone number, and I doubt he will play for West Ham again, with his name on a long list of failed signings for the Irons in the 2020s. Wolves. Ki-Jana just beats out Fabio Silva for this one, with the Dutchman coming through the Liverpool academy after being stolen from under Ajax's noses before graduation. The right-back got his debut in an FA Cup loss to Wolves in the 18-19 season, before 2 Carabao Cup and 1 more FA Cup appearances in the campaign after. Wolves then bought him for £9 million, where he managed 15 appearances, including his first 12 Premier League games. Wolves by now were on the up, however, and his time was limited the next season, leading to a loan to PSV for the 22-23 campaign. His time there was limited, and he was recalled in the winter, leading to a loan to Championship Stoke instead, where he finally became a regular starter, and he returned to the Potters for the whole of the 23-24 campaign, again being their first choice right-back. The season just gone, it was League One Auxerre, where he managed to be a regular starter once more, often used at right midfield rather than his natural spot as a defender. The former Netherlands under-21 international has done well on loan, and may well have worked his way back into Vitor Pereira's plans, with a big pre-season coming up for him. It would be a great way to end this list if someone on it can make it back into their Premier League club. Cheers for watching. A list of misfits, players on the loan carousel, and backups to the backup goalie. What about your club? If you support a Premier League team, do you agree with my choice? If not, who would you have for your club? Let me know in the comments down below, and be sure to check out some of the other videos on my channel. Stay tuned.